If you could have a superpower, would you rather turn back time or be in two places at once? Both fantasies speak to our primal anxieties, guilt about our past, and fear of what could be happening unbeknownst to us in the present. So what if one character got to experience both? Deck 9 has announced a new Life is Strange game, and their marketing strategy is to tease your ship.
Let's go, lesbians! Let's go, lesbians!
But does anyone still care? It's been 10 years. Tumblr is on life support. Admittedly, we are still hard up for queer women in high-profile games. If you didn't like Last of Us 2 or Signalis, then you probably spent the last decade romancing NPC women with your blank slate RPG character and dreaming of two actual gay characters. But Life is Strange. Isn't that just a high school drama in the form of a walking simulator? If you're not a lesbian simp transfixed by the image of your punk rock first crush, what's the appeal? To prepare for the next installment, I revisited the first game and its direct sequel, Double Exposure, with an open mind. I remembered the romantic parts working for what they were, but I wanted to see if the rest of the game elevated those scenes into something bigger. The murder mystery, the magical realism, the visual art, they're all fine, but what really shocked me was how much rereading it made me interested in the main character, because what I remembered about her from my first playthrough was nothing.
Goated with the sauce.
Max Caulfield, no relation, is not an iconic character. You won't see her cosplayed at many conventions or added to the roster of any fighting games. Her appearance is unassuming, and her voice actress gives a great performance, but is directed to mumble most of her lines.
I was afraid you'd say that.
She has the superpower to turn back time, and she mostly uses that to fix damage caused by her own butterfingers. But what she does have is a camera, and the camera might not have the ludic expressiveness of a Pokemon Snap-like, but the writers of both games managed to work it into every important character beat. On the first reading, Max can feel like a stock, shy, romance heroine, the kind of girl who looks plain and acts indecisive, a blank slate to let us project ourselves and enjoy the love interests. And that works in books, but when they're on screen twiddling their thumbs, it can drive people crazy. Young Max does lack confidence. In fact, the main mechanic of her game is self-doubt personified, where Telltale's Walking Dead, Life is Strange's clear inspiration, forced you to act decisively and underlined your every decision with an "everyone will remember that." This game does the opposite. You make a choice, and Max immediately second-guesses herself. If you're able to distance yourself from the player character and remain interested in the plot, that indecision does create dramatic tension. Like, how did she end up this way? Will she overcome this weakness?
Just how I like them. Tall, shady, and not too bright.
It's tough to make a game about an artist. Games can be good spaces for creativity, but a plot-driven story about an artist is always hard, because artists spend most of their time sitting on their asses. Here, the murder mystery and relationship drama provide a good backbone for this coming-of-age artist character. She's applied herself and already gotten into a specialized institution, but for the whole game she suffers from this creative block. The plot starts with her refusing to submit work that she's already made. But surely getting into a fancy school should be a confidence boost. Plenty of her fellow students are on massive ego trips about their status. It's a big part of the setting, and it's revealed early on that Max is a scholarship student, and even in the final episode, she's resentful of the expensive gear her wealthier peers have. While the game doesn't have any mechanics to reinforce money anxiety, it does use its environment to express that class disparity. The game starts in the fancy academy, clean, well-decorated, but with persistent reminders from Max's voiceover that she feels out of place. Her first photography class consists mostly of name-dropping celebrities and a couple of auteur theory platitudes about what made them great. And shortly after that, you can look at Max's bookshelf. And what photographers does she look up to? Philippe Lorca de Corsia, Julia Margaret Cameron, Deneau, Cartier-Bresson, Hamilton, all of whom were known for their posed, formal portraits, except maybe Cartier-Bresson. And what kind of art does Max do? Candid Polaroids. Now, a lazier screenwriter might have made her favor someone like Vivian Maier, a woman who kept to herself and took spontaneous shots of quirky subjects, just like Max does. And in fact, the story does name-drop Maier in its first scene. But it seems they've deliberately filled Max's bookshelf with more serious, historical types. And that creates a sense of pressure. Even I felt dumb just reading all those names and having to Google them. Imagine being a student, lectured about all these great geniuses day in, day out, and then told to hand in your work to some contest that could make or break you with a single judgment. Suddenly Max's nervous, wallflower demeanor feels like an appropriate response to everything around her, which comes off a lot more naturally than what a hack teen drama might do and just give her a popular blonde bully.
Now, why don't you go fuck your selfie?
Yes, Max does also have a stock bully who starts off not too interesting. She has plenty of goofy, memeable lines, but her actual reasons for hassling Max aren't her poverty or loneliness, but her twee hipster style that Victoria considers an affectation.
Oh hi, I'm Max Caulfield, and I'm so sensitive that butterflies make me cry.
And that's petty high school bullshit too, but the voiceover and Max's time powers give their relationship more depth quickly. You're given a fair degree of choice. You could choose to beat Victoria at her own game, giving Max more of an aggressive personality in the process, but if so, she'll empathize and reconsider. You also have the option to be the better person and kill her with kindness. It is a fair criticism that this plot-driven game has almost no major plot divergences based on player choice, but it's also a small-town, episodic story with a large cast of characters. Victoria isn't a power player in any of the most dramatic story beats, but she's like a speed bump who's always in the right place at the right time to annoy you when you're about to uncover something. So the choice of whether to fight back or be patient does form meaningful interactions later. One of Max's most impassioned statements is a short speech to Victoria during the last episode, and it plays out wildly differently compared on these inputs.
I just want you to think about how much it would hurt if somebody did that to you.
I didn't.
Of course you did. You're so insecure, you can't even be happy with your own talent.
And all of this might just be window dressing, a side story. But that's not even the only time Victoria plays foil to Max in episode 5. The big contest that Max was supposed to enter to get her career started, in the first timeline, Victoria ends up winning it. But Max uses her powers to change history and win instead. And once again, the game uses a quiet moment in an explorable space to create a dramatic conflict. There's so much going on in the plot that this moment feels too quiet. Earlier, Victoria confides in Max that her parents run an art gallery, and even with all her bluster and resources, she's terrified by the social pressure of that world. And once Max finds herself in one, she feels about the same. The NPC dialogue is all casual, there's nothing out of the ordinary here, but then another plot twist reveals that in order to reach this gallery and enjoy this publicity, she's literally forgotten about her friends and left them to die. And that's a reflection of her greatest fear, the guilt that exists at the core of her most important relationship with Chloe Price.
And I was like, damn, that girl is fine. But then I realized it was David Bowie.
Chloe Price is about the same as I remembered, a flat character used well. She's flawed, destructive, and refuses to change one bit until the final moment. But her stubbornness makes her the kind of rebel girl that every young lesbian aware of injustice wants to be. And most of us are afraid to be because, if we acted like this for a day, we'd probably die, like she does. Repeatedly. For Chloe, the whole game is an exercise in abusing her get-out-of-jail-free card until she finally learns to empathize better and makes this heroic sacrifice for the sake of her loved ones. So she does technically have an arc, but what makes her engaging is the point of view through which we see her. Max watches Chloe's family struggle to make ends meet across multiple different timelines. And the game strikes a balance with this, showing the stress that debt puts on a family without exploiting it for pathos. Max is nostalgic for their shared childhood because back then, Chloe's parents seemed perfect. Surely they had their problems in reality, but the 13-year-old Max couldn't perceive those. In her 18-year-old present, things seem much worse, with her new stepfather employing corporal punishment, for which there is no excuse. But the game uses David's bad behavior as a way to make its central characters more aware of adult problems. Max respects Chloe's mother enough to listen to her, and eventually understands how brutal single parenthood on a low income would have been for her. It's quite possible that she married David as a matter of survival, and their good relationship is just a fortunate accident. And the construction of the game gives us a huge degree of freedom to express our view on this relationship. Players who see David as irredeemable can tell him off at every opportunity, and those who want to try and help him can get him to admit wrongdoing. It's the kind of family drama that anyone can understand, gay or otherwise. Being positioned as a superpowered player character and watching all this pain unfold is going to put the thought in your head, can I help her? Can I save her? And as a character, Max wants to save Chloe as atonement for, quote, abandoning her in the past. It's inarguable that these characters have romantic tension, but romance itself isn't central to the game. The writers specified in the text itself that they were going for a Twin Peaks type setting, and Episode 1 mostly centers on that dynamic, a paranormal investigation with high emotions motivating all the townsfolk as potential suspects. And the writers chose that format because they also had the TV screenwriting luxury of reading the audience reactions in the months between their episodic releases. In a later episode, Frank jokingly refers to Max and Chloe as Thelma and Louise, or is it Bonnie and Clyde? I can't guess exactly how that one line was written, but it certainly recalls the image of them in a pickup truck together, leaving a would-be male love interest in the dust so they could rehash their old feelings and enjoy their time together again. It's the kind of feminist dream that does spawn a dedicated fandom. Multiple women in lead roles with defined interests, ambitions, and appearances. The fan game, Love is Strange, works well because its characters have plenty to talk about and a beautiful setting to explore, and all that took was taking out all the murder.
There's something weird going on with you.
So, about the murder. Content warning. I remembered the game mostly for the cute moments and thought that the ending might come off as forced or excessive, but I'd argue it fits perfectly because it recontextualizes a core subject of the game, photography. All Max's classmates appear to be serious, hardworking artists. Anytime we get to see their work, she comments positively on it. Even the people she hates. But the plot isn't about Max growing or experimenting creatively. It's a story about the corruption running under the surface of an ideal small town. Most of our heroes are women, and our villain is this man. But put away your keyboards, fellas, because there's more to it than the gender dynamic. On one level, it's Jefferson's auteur ego and David's militant physical discipline that seem like classic symbols of what we could call toxic masculinity. But women could be just as guilty of being corrupt administrators, abusive step-parents, or teachers. What Jefferson represents more specifically in context is the male gaze. And I hope you remember from all the Lindsay Ellis videos, the male gaze is not the exclusive power of men. It's an old term, which we could alternatively title the objectifying gaze or the predatory gaze, and it would still work the same way. The power of the gaze is that of the camera to turn three-dimensional people into two-dimensional objects for our consumption. You can frame your subjects in ways that emphasize their humanity and push back on the observer, or you could lean into the gaze. It's baked into the language of photography itself. Even good photographers will talk about my subject this and my subject that. And Max ends up on the receiving end in this memorable horror scene, but she's also on the other side of it throughout the game. Look at the way she uses her camera around Chloe. During one memorable moment, they wake up in the same bed together, platonically, and Max tries to capture the moment for herself with a picture, but Chloe jumps into the frame. It's a sweet moment, especially because in all the earlier opportunities to take Chloe's picture, she seems totally zoned out, allowing herself to be treated like a prop. And when Jefferson steps in, Max faces her worst nightmare. On a superficial level, it's obvious. This is bad. Don't do this to women, or anyone. But so much of this climax is about Max's negative feelings toward herself. Sure, Jefferson is just a crazy guy, but when Max asks what he's after, he says,
I can't compromise my vision with amateurs. The world is what an artist makes it.
Perfection. And that's what drives all photographers crazy. You can just keep shooting the same picture over and over again, tweaking your settings and lenses and film and LUTs until you go nuts because none of them feel just right. Photographing a subject that has you stumped is enough of a nightmare with plain old objects, but doing so with a real person is like taking out your psychosis on them if you have an unhealthy attitude about it. And we could never picture Max millennial cringe Caulfield doing anything this evil, but her guilt from abandoning her best friend has damaged their relationship. And that relatable guilt is amplified through the what-if scenes where Max tries to edit her history like a picture. By episode 4, she learns that what's done is done, but by episode 5, it seems that she might have learned her lesson too late. Jefferson provides her with an antagonist, putting her and her friends in immediate danger, but it's noteworthy that defeating him isn't quite the climax of the game. What follows is a long sequence of very Evangelion-ish nightmares about sexual insecurity and rejection, all of which mock Max for thinking she was ever good enough. Because it turns out, for sci-fi reasons, that Max's powers will blow up her town unless she undoes everything she manipulated. While most choices in the game lack real consequence, it does stick the landing. Even if you hate Chloe and think that sacrificing her is a no-brainer, doing so finally gives her the chance to grow, admit her faults, and earn redemption. Saving Chloe might seem selfish and stupid, but given how much guilt Max has held on to about letting her go, it's tough to make Max do it. Letting Chloe die and forcing Max to live without do-overs is clearly a coming of age. So, assuming this is a functional ending, where could another game take it from here? When Life is Strange came out, I was the same age as its protagonist, and they've conveniently allowed her to age right along with me. Stretch before bed, Max, it helps with the back pain. My second playthrough of Double Exposure did not change my opinion that it's just kind of okay. If you really liked the first one, this is more of that, but it's not going to change the hearts and minds if you're on the fence. However, it does have a few clever twists. It puts Max in another school setting, but this time as a teacher, and the supporting cast is a web of professors, administrators, students, townspeople, and their relationships are much more complicated and unfortunately lack the emotional immediacy that the first game had. Being a teenager just simplified Max's perspective. It made it easier to get to know the supporting cast. And with this game, you might be halfway through before you can even remember who's who. As with most adventure games, it's the setting that makes it interesting to play again. The snowy landscape is gorgeous, and the weather underscores this theme that Max is closed off, burdened by holding on to all of her secrets, like the ice needs to be broken. And the subtext of the story is much more fun to experience with actually good facial animation and cutscene direction for a change. Those techniques help characterize her as an observer, taking in the details around her while keeping her own feelings more subdued. And that subtle character comes through, especially since all of her friends are mugging and joking aggressively, trying to endear themselves in their limited screen time. The new cast works on paper. There's something to figure out about each of them, some amount of character depth, but it's the complexity of their relationships that hurts them. Again, in the first game, it was easy to learn each new character as adult, teacher, friend, bully. But now we have to interpret Max's relationship through both her private sphere and her public sphere, and the additional layers of metaphysics and dimension hopping do not make it any easier. What does gel perfectly with the story and gameplay is the use of magic powers. Most of the puzzles in the first game were about brute force, making mistakes and undoing them until a solution arrived, but the puzzles in Double Exposure make Max feel like an actual creative thinker. The real standout puzzles integrate varied props into unified environments, forcing us and her to consider them from all angles. And even the simpler investigation moments are an expansion of the old template. Where young Max would give fun flavor text about individual props, adult Max often finds herself in these tense moments with limited time to examine a bunch of pieces of potential evidence. But we, the player, have no time limit because her observational skills are implicitly good enough that we can do it at our own pace. And then there's the dimension hopping. If you remember Elizabeth from BioShock, imagine a woman who could leap between worlds but then had to deal with the consequences of her interworld meddling instead of just pulling dumb action set pieces out of her ass. Max uses her powers to play detective, but they also give her the chance to express more complex flaws and desires. One of the hard parts about working at a college is that everyone wants wildly different things out of the same experience. Trying to cater to every student, let alone the management, is a nightmare. The power to spy on people, learn their motives, and monitor their communications. It's obviously unethical, but gives Max the capability to please everyone again. Plus, it's expressed through this visual effect of double exposure, which looks and sounds great. But what does all the theming amount to? Both games are fundamentally about solving mysteries of tangled relationships, with one emotionally loaded relationship at the center. And this is where the first game outdoes the second. Childhood best friends and potential first love is just more emotionally immediate than fellow adults who hung out for a few months at a new job. Double Exposure tries to backfill too much exposition in episode 1, and it crowds out the character of Safi before she can even make an impression. We're still trying to figure out what happened to Max in all the intervening years, and then Safi's dead, and then she's alive again.
What the fuck is happening?
And then for 2 whole episodes, she's just kind of off screen because the game has to contrive vague reasons for us not to talk to her. Because if we did talk to her, it would kind of ruin the mystery immediately.
You've got powers?
So when the game's finally done stalling around the 2/3 mark, it starts to get good because Max meets a fellow magical girl who comes up with a plan to abuse their powers to punish evil in the name of the moon. And despite all of Max's ethical comments so far that she stopped using her powers because of the danger, she immediately goes along with it. It's a clear piece of hypocrisy that sticks out the instant it happens, and it's there to tell us that she's falling back into old habits. It's like a horror movie forcing its protagonist to do something stupid to make us yell, "Don't go in there." We've seen Max's bad pattern, and now we're seeing her clearly replicate it with a substitute Chloe. This toxic, codependent enabling is a great climax, but the complete nothing of a middle stops it from landing. It seems that the writers decided the metaphysics of giving every character 2 alternate selves and having the deuteragonist lie to your face for the whole game would just be too confusing, but cutting out the emotional center of the game for half of its runtime wasn't an effective solution. And now we come to the genre fiction nerds' favorite excuse. It's the middle of a trilogy. They're just setting stuff up for the big finish. And in my ideal timeline, Reunion will pit these characters against each other. Imagine our hero going all the way from a nervous but complex young idealist to a disillusioned loner to a veteran sorceress trapped in a toxic love triangle between 2 superpowered ladies. Because Max Caulfield will return in